This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business live from the Kenyan capital where it's 9 p.m. I am Peninah Karibe. As always, a pleasure to have you with us. Let's begin with a look at the markets. The Egyptian exchange ended today's session on a mixed note, adding about 2.4 billion Egyptian pounds, around about $144 million to the market capitalization amid Arab and foreign selling. The benchmark EGX30 rose 0.22% or 30.29 points to close at 14,043.33 points. The EGX had ended Sunday's session in a semi-collective regression as EGX30 rose 0.11%, while EGX50 declined 0.43%. Coming up on the show tonight, Zimbabwe's finance minister pledges to raise public servants' pay amid calls for a strike. India's Bharti Airtel. We begin global business in Zimbabwe, where the government is ready to raise civil servants' wages for the second time in 3 months. The country's finance minister made the announcement after a labor group threatened protests. The Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions threatened mass action last month after the government made the RTGS the sole legal tender. The move comes in the wake of year-on-year inflation of around 100% that has eroded the value of Zimbabweans' wages and savings. The minister said the Southern African country's central bank wouldn't hesitate to raise interest rates above their current level of 50% to deal with people speculating on the value of the local currency. All right, let's get more now from Farai Makutuya, who's live for us in Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Farai, how much should civil servants expect? What are labor unions pushing for?
Well, Peninah, when this negotiation process began last...
I'm afraid we've lost that signal, but we shall try and reconnect with Farai in just a bit and revisit that story. Here in Kenya, the Capital Markets Authority has temporarily barred renowned stockbrokers from trading at the Nairobi Bourse or holding any key positions in firms listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. Ex-Kestrel CEO Andrew Dusimon and Ali Khan Sachu have been found guilty of insider trading involving shares of a leading oil marketer, Kenol Kobil. Sachu has been barred for 3 years, while Dusimon has been handed a 1-year ban. The authority further imposed a financial penalty of nearly $24,000 on Dusimon, who they established disclosed price-sensitive material on the Kenol Kobil transaction on the sale of the 24.99% Wells Petroleum shareholding in Kenol Kobil to ex-Kestrel CEO. It also revealed that Sachu received 4.7 million shillings as commissions based on trading with the insider information that was provided. Now, the Steinhoff International debacle moves to the next phase as the global retailer turns to the courts in an attempt to retrieve hundreds of thousands of dollars in salaries and bonuses paid to 2 senior executives at the embattled business. CGTN's Angelo Coppola has more.
Steinhoff has applied to the South African courts to get ex-CEO Marcus Jooste and his chief financial officer to pay back the money they were paid in salaries and bonuses while still employed by the group. Jooste has countersued.
Steinhoff is, without doubt, the greatest corporate embarrassment to come out of Southern Africa in our generation. It was a brand scheme to build a worldwide retailer that proved to be an absolute disaster, and there was nothing there. There were just lies, exaggerations, and a perpetual chain of corporate obfuscations which were designed to enrich a few, in particular Marcus Jooste and those closest to him. When it all collapsed, shareholders were left with nothing.
Traders and investors are staying away from the stock on the JSE and the Frankfurt stock exchanges, where it's listed, and for good reason.
I think what is still on the market is worth less than nothing. You have to be mad if you're still owning those, because there's an enormous mountain of debt that group has, and all they've done so far is reschedule and delay that.
The Steinhoff International share price is languishing at around 125 cents on the JSE from a high of 5,600 cents in November last year.
We're dealing with the last scraps of dried out flesh on a dead carcass. The bondholders, the debt holders, will get whatever there is. The lawyers are now circling and fighting over the last scraps. And this lawsuit is perhaps just designed to make Steinhoff shareholders or the board feel slightly better about themselves.
The recently instituted Steinhoff lawsuit will be contested by Jooste according to his lawyers. What Lagrange plans to do is still unclear.
Unfortunately, Mr. Jooste is far too clever to have allowed any of these illegal gains that he enjoyed to still be in his own name. I've no doubt that he has hidden money in all sorts of places, far from reach. He's far too clever to have left his last rands in his own bank account.
The court case will be a protracted affair, with each party trying to contest the other's claims. And the only beneficiaries in this fight aren't going to be the shareholders, but the legal teams. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, as we mentioned at the top of the hour, the Zimbabwean government says it is now ready to raise civil servants' wages for the second time in 3 months. And I'm happy to say we finally have Farai Mokutuya back with us. He's live in Harare. So, Farai, I was asking you before we lost you, how much are civil servants expecting from the government?
Well, Peninah, and as I was saying, I mean, the last time I spoke to the teachers' union that was part of this negotiation process, they had calculated that the lowest paid teacher should be earning about 4,100 RTGS dollars. That is for them to be able to survive and to get by. Now, that represents a tenfold increment in terms of the amount of money that is being earned by the lowest paid teacher currently. Now, I find that nearly impossible for government to meet that demand purely because A, it doesn't have the capacity to do so, but also B, that will have implications on its fiscal position. It will be required to then print this money or borrow in order to meet those sort of levels of increment, but also it will also have an impact on inflation, which government is also trying to put a cap on. The last time civil servants were awarded an increment back in April, it was 29%. So we expect that government will try to improve on that offer, given the fact that things have gotten harder, prices have gone up, the cost of living has increased, but also to avert any form of unrest. So clearly there will be some hard compromising that will be required over the next few days as these negotiations go on, Peninah.
And speaking of inflation, Farai, it has soared every year now. It's about 98%. Are there any measures the government is putting in place to bring it down?
Well, in the last few days, we've seen government ramp up the pressure on businesses. The president himself, no less, spoke at a recent event where he warned retailers, businesses, manufacturers who are not lowering their prices. He said that there's some very punitive action that is coming their way. It will be meted out on them. And he's trying to warn these businesses to lower their prices. Before this, we know that monetary and fiscal authorities had been trying to appeal to businesses to lower their prices, not to peg their prices to the black market rate for foreign currency, which is what a lot of businesses were doing. And the logic by the monetary authorities is that, look, if we've changed the allocation system, we've got this interbank market, we're no longer trying to fix the rate of foreign currency, that should translate into a more efficient allocation system so companies and businesses who need foreign currency are able to get it quicker when they need it at better prices. And so that should also lead to a reduction in prices. Sadly, that hasn't happened yet. And I'm sure in the coming days we will see government continue to put pressure on businesses for them to respond to these calls to lower prices.
All right, so let's talk about the RTGS currency, which government has renamed the Zimbabwe dollar. It has faced stiff opposition from trade unions, and now 3 people have gone to court challenging the government's move. Why are they opposed to the RTGS?
Well, Peninah, I think the applications that we've seen so far, people effectively feel that, what happened here was an ambush. They were not expecting this. They had been told all along that the RTGS, the bond note was equal in value to the US dollar, that the RTGS dollar was equal in value to the US dollar. And so the applications that have been put forward are citing the fact that they were misled by government, that this is tantamount to theft or, them being compromised compromised of their property because their bank balances were converted into RTGS dollars without their consent, and so they've lost out their value where effectively they should have had US dollars, where these bond notes and bond coins were promised to pay the value in US dollars. So people feel that in a way they have lost out, and it's an unfair measure that the government has taken. But also there's also a constitutional aspect where some of the one of the people who is challenging this is saying that, look, the proper procedures were not followed. It is an unconstitutional move, and so that is why there are these challenges that have been, 3 of them now, that have been put before the courts, and we'll wait and see how the courts will determine this.
All right, and then we are hearing from the CEO of State Power Utilities Zesa Holdings, talking about the end of dollarization and how that is hurting its ability to deliver power because mines could no longer pay it in US dollars. How is the government dealing with this issue, given that now the RTGS is the sole legal tender?
Well, indeed, I think it is a very tough situation for government to try and address this power crisis, given the changes that have happened on the currency front. But we do know that the power utilities owed about $1.2 billion in terms of unpaid bills from different people, business, local authorities, government departments, amongst others. And they are aggressively trying to recover this money. Now, recovering it will be able to help them, to get foreign currency, to be able to pay off its credit to the people it owes money, the power utility in South Africa as well as Mozambique, and hopefully, if they're able to service those debts, be able to, be afforded more power to put into the national grid. Over the weekend, President Mnangagwa met his South African counterpart, President Cyril Ramaphosa, and one of the things that we're told was on the agenda was this issue of trying to find some sort of diplomatic or political opportunity or room to maneuver where the power utility here can be allowed to continue accessing power from Eskom, which had cut it off because of those unpaid bills. But I think it all goes back to that point that you made earlier, the change in foreign currency. $1.2 billion is owed to the power utility. That was, until recently, US dollars that it was owed. But the change in the currency regime means that that $1.2 billion, the value of that has effectively been slashed on the interbank, based on the interbank rate, and that's about 10. The rate is about 10. So that 1.2 billion is now about 120 million US dollars that the power utility will try to recover. Still a significant amount, which will help, and Zimbabwe needs all the help it can get right now on the power front.
It does indeed, Farai. Thank you very much. Great chatting with you. Farai Mokutuya live for us in Harare. Up next, we're looking at your corporate headlines. South Africa's Impala Platinum, otherwise known as Implat, says it expects to swing back to annual profit thanks to an improved platinum metals basket price and higher sales volumes. The mining firm expects refined platinum production for the period to increase by 4% to 1.5 million ounces from 1.4 million ounces. This is expected to boost platinum sales volumes by 12% to 1.5 million ounces. The Central Bank of Kenya has issued a notice requiring digital loans to be treated like normal bank loans. Under the new regulation, mobile loan defaulters will only be blacklisted by the Credit Reference Bureau after 6 months of non-payment have elapsed. CBK decided to intervene in the mobile lending space after a study conducted by the lenders team showed that as many as 2.7 million digital borrowers in Kenya were blacklisted due to minor defaults. Botswana-based Choppies supermarket has now shut down its Kiambu town branch here in Kenya. This comes just days after the retailer's Bungoma outlet in the country was closed owing to stock shortage. Choppies' other outlets across the country are also struggling with stocks almost out at its Kisumu, Nanyuki, Embakasi and Mombasa Road branches. The closures comes amid reports of the firm's revenue losses and infighting at the management level in Botswana. And Deutsche Bank has laid off staff from Sydney to London as it began 18,000 job cuts in an $8.3 billion reinvention. This would mean yet another annual loss, knocking the German lender's shares. Shares in Deutsche Bank erased early gains and were down 4.1% at 12 GMT after the bank's finance chief flagged significant uncertainty whether it would break even in 2020. And that's a look at your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business, coming up after the break. India's Bharti Airtel prepares to list at the Nigerian bourse. And in Ethiopia, the government to license 2 foreign mobile service providers.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Leaders from across Africa launched the operational phase of the biggest trade area by members in the world. Covering a population of 1.2 billion people, the CFTA aims to boost intra-African trade levels and eventually create a single continent market. CGTN's Ramanyang is covering events in Niger's capital. As he reports, there's still plenty of technical work that needs to be done before the formal launch in 2020.
The formal launch has happened and the countdown to trading under CFTA rules 12 months from now begins. But between now and the 1st of July 2020, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Some countries, for instance, are still concerned about potential revenue losses that may come with this free trade area.
Let's take myth by myth. Tariffs. What is the CFTA going to do? The CFTA is going to take away about 6% of the tariffs. We're going to go down to zero on almost 90% of the goods over a period of 10 years. Essentially, we're hoping, and that's what we've seen in many other with many other free trade area agreements, is that you create more jobs, you create more businesses, you diversify the economy, and that gives you more growth. So you get more value-added tax, you get more personal income tax, you get more. So what you lose on the tariff side, you gain on the production and the value-added side, because you're creating more industry, you're diversifying.
To deal with that specific problem, however, the Exim Bank has offered one solution.
Our board has approved a $1 billion CFTA adjustment facility to support countries that may suffer fiscal revenue losses as a result of the CFTA implementation. We hope that this will help countries to accelerate the ratification of the CFTA.
By removing tariffs on about 90% of goods that are traded within the region and non-tariff barriers as well, the CFTA aims to boost the portion of intra-African trade from about 15 or 16%, where it is at the moment, to at least 60% by 2022. But remember, a lot of that trade, especially outside the monetary unions, tends to take place in a third currency. To come to Niger from Kenya, for instance, my team used an Ethiopian airline, and our tickets are priced in US dollars. Now, the Exim Bank is estimating that cost of currency convergence on transactions of that nature, from the Kenyan shilling to the US dollars, Ethiopian birr, costs at least $5 billion a year across the continent. Now, of course, there's also no escaping the wider context in which this trade deal was arrived at a time when the United States has ignited disputes with the EU, her North American neighbors, China as well, and at the same time blocked the appointment of new judges at the WTO. The CFTA sort of stands out as a reminder that even in a cynical age of narrow self-interest, sometimes countries can still put their common interest over and above the national ones.
It's a path towards creating an internal market. And I know it is difficult to convince people that you're serious about this. I went through this in the European Union, and I saw how difficult it was to convince the people that you are going to deliver that. But at the end of the day, I also see how when you do that, the benefits that this brings to people. When you help very small markets that have very limited means of growing, purely trading within their borders, when you open this region to their traders, I know how much benefit this brings. So, I mean, glass half full is my theory. Glass half full and small steps forward.
So even as the world's biggest free trade area now starts to take shape, there are still negotiations left on what goods will be excluded or not from tariff liberalization list and what sectors still have to be shielded, and of course, plenty more. Even after this meeting here in Niger, there's still plenty of work to be done by policymakers. Ramanyang, CGTN, Niamey.
Bharti Airtel subsidiary Airtel Africa aims to list on the Nigerian bourse this week. This comes after the stock exchange postponed the listing to ensure the telecoms company meets its listing requirements. The listing is offering 3.76 billion shares with a share price at $1. This gives the firm a market capitalization valued at $4.4 billion. Airtel shares registered in Britain may be moved from the London market to Nigeria, pending approval by the custodians in London and currency regulators in Nigeria. Notably, Nigeria's stocks have been compressed by low growth in the country as local stocks fell 6.8% in 2019 compared to 17.8% in 2018. Our Deji Badmas is live for us in Lagos. He's been following this story and joins us now for more on that. So Deji, this listing has been postponed a number of times. Has Airtel now fully complied with the requirements of the NSE?
Well, Peninah, I would suppose so, because if Airtel had not fully complied, of course, the NSE would not have given it the go-ahead now to list on the market tomorrow. What we understand is that before now, Airtel had actually not complied fully, but we understand at some point the NSE had to give it a waiver now in terms of the number of shareholders it will require to open. The NSE requirement is that you must have at least 300 shareholders. We understand that they were given some kind of waiver. So I would suppose all of the requirements have been fulfilled, and that's why we're going to have a listing tomorrow, Peninah.
All right, and we do know, Deji, Nigerian stocks have been weighed down by the slow economic slowdown in the country. So is Airtel expecting to raise enough interest amongst investors?
Well, I think the interest is there. Before now, a lot of investors had been asking, local investors now had actually been pushing on the authorities to ensure that all the telecoms companies operating in the country actually list on the stock exchange, and we're beginning to see that now. MTN has listed. Airtel is now coming. The expectation is that others would follow suit. So we now have a telecommunications sector now in the stock exchange. So I suppose there would be enough interest. And the expectation is that this would probably raise around 1.36 trillion naira that's the listing now, and that we're looking at a situation where at the end of the listing, the market cap of the NSE would definitely go up. Some people are predicting 14 trillion naira, which we just have to wait and see. But of course, the interest is there, because this is what investors had actually been campaigning for a very long time, and it is happening now. So I think the interest is there, but we just have to wait and see how it performs tomorrow when it's listed. But there's no question at all that the interest had always been there. I don't think it's waned in any way at all.
All right, but we also know, Deji, that investors, particularly foreign investors, have been a bit jittery because of the lack of the cabinet. It hasn't been named yet 4 months after election. So how is that affecting government business as well as, investor appetite in the country?
Well, Peninah, you could say it's deja vu once again, because the last time President Buhari, the last time before now in 2015 when he was elected, it took about 6 months before he formed his cabinet. So a lot of people had expected that the government would have learned some lessons. It was understandable that, he was taking over from an opposition government, but this time it's the same government taking over from itself. So it's still a surprise to some people why the president has not, up till this moment, at least make an announcement, but it's quite understandable. The process is now involved. The names, so whoever you are shortlisting, the names would have to be vetted by the State Security Service. That's the Department of State Security Service. That's the secret police of the country. Now that names would have to be forwarded to the National Assembly, the Senate to be precise. The Senate only resumed seating now last week. So the expectation is that the names will be forwarded. I'm talking about the names of the nominees now, ministerial nominees will be forwarded to the Senate this week. We're waiting to see that happen. I don't expect that there's going to be any delay at all, but no question at all that investors are jittery about this. People are not really happy. This is the kind of uncertainty that investors actually don't like. And it's no doubt weighing down certain government decisions. For instance, some of the projects that contracts that are supposed to be awarded, they've not been awarded. You need ministers in place. You don't expect that civil servants would be able to do the job, even though you have permanent secretaries who are supposed to handle these positions until ministers are appointed. But you expect those ministers to be in place. Certain decisions are no doubt affected. And everybody wants to see these, they want to see the president wrap up with this for the ministers to come in, especially when the reports we're getting is that quite a number of the ministers, would be returning. So, we just have to wait and see. But no one expects. For most of us, we expect that an announcement would not go beyond this week. And then the process of confirmation, of course, might take another week. And then the ministers would be in place. But it's certainly not a good one, especially when you consider the fact that in South Africa, just days after Cyril Ramaphosa was elected president of the country, he went ahead to announce, his cabinet. The same thing with someone in Senegal. But Nigeria seems to be taking too much time. But we don't expect it to go beyond this week or latest next week. At least not beyond July anyway. But certainly not good for investments.
Not good at all, Deji. And I have to say, Nigeria really is known across the continent for taking its time with those cabinet appointments. No surprises there. Thank you very much for joining us. All right, so let's go to Ethiopia now, which plans to sell a minority stake in the state-owned phone monopoly. It will award telecommunications licenses to 2 new operators in the first quarter of the next year. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is currently opening up the state's telecommunications sector as part of his agenda to liberalize one of the world's fastest growing economies. Ethiopia is one of the final frontiers globally for multinational telecoms companies. They have been eagerly awaiting the government's announcement on the market structure since Parliament passed a bill last month outlining the scope of a regulator for the sector. Cities in Africa and all over the world are rethinking their town planning and service delivery strategies. More than half the world's population live in urban areas. That's set to grow in the next 2 decades, placing a further strain on resources. The 3rd annual Smart Cities Conference held in Johannesburg this week looked at how Africa is coping with the challenges of urbanization. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
Africa is home to some of the fastest growing cities in the world. The migration of millions of people to urban areas every year places a strain on resources, infrastructure, and basic services. Technology is fast becoming the answer to these challenges and is driving the creation of smart cities, which came under the spotlight in Johannesburg this week.
Planning for any smart city is a data-intensive, evidence-intensive process. And most African cities have got a problem of collecting the data. And as a result, they cannot clearly set targets, goals. If you are not very clear on what the needs are in your city, in terms of how many people need certain service like water or electricity, it becomes very difficult for you to plan in the long term.
Collection of data through strategic sensors connected by the internet enable more efficient and better run cities. But they take time to build and is costly for most African cities.
We have to accept that Africa versus other continents is not at that level. And how do we introduce technology in such a way that we don't stay behind, but at the same time do not unawarely cut people out of the process, which is social inclusion.
It does, however, bring opportunity, especially in developing more climate-friendly infrastructure.
Africa has got a great opportunity to go the sustainability route because we have very low infrastructure. But the challenge is, in the electricity space to be particular, is that Africa lacks the levels of electrification. But Africa is endowed with a lot of sunlight, a lot of wind, and a lot of geothermal properties or assets that it has. And as a result, Africa can harness a lot of these renewable energy forms far much more easier than even the West.
Most people want a city that works, where they're easily able to commute and live a good quality life. Nairobi and Cape Town are so far leading the push towards fully integrated cities, but with proper policies, investment and planning, other urban hubs are expected to follow. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Uganda has signed a new labour agreement with the United Arab Emirates to improve the working conditions of its citizens there. Labour exporting firms in Uganda and their foreign partners in the UAE will be liable for workers they take on. This follows reports of human rights abuses, including sexual harassment, poor pay and heavy workload. Isabel Nakiria reports from Kampala.
Rose Naziri's employment in Jordan took a physical toll. She worked 10 hours a day, was sexually harassed and sometimes beaten when she was too tired to continue. Naziri says she gave up and attempted suicide.
I could not stand the mistreatment, working long hours without meals. She beat me up, almost removing my eye. I ran off and ended up jumping from the 3rd floor and broke my left leg.
Every year, hundreds of girls are trafficked from Africa to Arab countries in search for jobs. Labour agencies in Uganda work with foreign firms to recruit girls as domestic workers. Unlike Naziri, many girls return with injuries. Their employers allegedly torture some to death. The 2 years Naziri spent in Jordan is an experience she lives to regret. She's now recuperating, but she worries she may be left with permanent scars. Naziri returned to Uganda without a penny. She says the labour agency took away the money she earned, accusing her of not completing her 2-year contract. Naziri's contract was written in Arabic and she signed it without understanding the contents.
My worst time there was during winter. They would expect you to go out and scrub verandas every day. I asked them to allow me to do that once a week and they refused. And when I reported to the Labour office, I was beaten up.
Uganda's Ministry of Labour has so far accredited 65 labour firms to recruit domestic workers. The agreement with the UAE is meant to ensure the protection of workers during their contracts. Employees will now report abuses to the labour authorities in the UAE for action. But campaigners say this won't solve the problem.
But we should consider their lives, their working condition. Does the law favor these girls? Is the condition going to be the same as we are seeing? No, one is not supposed to work with a phone, without phone. You're not supposed to have your traveling documents. It's quite embarrassing. Your documents, you don't know where they are. The passports, I mean. You're just there like a slave.
Uganda already has running agreements with Jordan and Saudi Arabia. However, the allegations of torture continue. The Labour Ministry warns against using unlicensed employment agencies. For Naziri, it's not over yet, as she stays on medication with the hope of taking away the pain caused by what she went through abroad. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Technology is continuing to advance modern industries, offering a whole new meaning. A South African engineer has developed a smart locker system used by patients to collect medication for chronic illnesses. Box is meant to help reduce waiting times and congestion in healthcare facilities. Here's CGTN's Laura Walubengo with the details.
A young electric engineer has become the first South African to win the African Prize for Engineering Innovation. Neo Hutiri bagged $25,000 for developing a smart locker system which dispenses medicine to patients with chronic illnesses.
I was trained to build solutions and product. The idea was to then say, can we build a product that is patient-centric, that speaks to us first as patients, while still adhering to all of the regulatory requirements and all of the framework that the Department of Health wants to exist to improve access to care.
Pelebox helps reduce the waiting times and congestion at healthcare facilities countrywide. Patients spend most of their time in queues waiting to refill their medication. The prescribed drugs are placed in lockers and secured by health workers. Patients then receive a notification on their phones and use a one-time PIN to access the machine.
Pelebox is okay. It's not stressful. For instance, when I get a message on my phone, I can go fetch it the day after. Even if I have work to do, I can go get my medication. I don't need to go in the long queues at the clinic anymore. So I just come in, get my medication, and leave. I'm happy about that.
Technology has offered various sectors a huge leap. Service delivery has eased in recent times and improved facilities across the globe.
People want to leverage technology. They want to have access to that fourth IR environment where they're engaging with this next frontier of service delivery that leverages that particular technology. People are hungry for systems that work for them. So it was very rewarding for us. It was very inspiring seeing that actually the work that we do is on a global level. It can compete, it can scale, it has multiple country applications. There was this almost an endorsement of saying, we see you.
For Hutiri, winning the Royal Academy of Engineering Award came as a surprise. In 2018, South Africa launched a similar vending machine dubbed the ATM Pharmacy. However, he's now focusing on channeling the prize money into developing Pelebox further and manufacturing more units. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
You're watching Global Business. Coming up after the break. British firms cut investments of uncertainty on Brexit. And sports brands showcase merchandise and trends in Asia at the Shanghai Expo.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
For look at some economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Ucheopo reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
A look at the top stories of the day. Former Congolese militia commander Bosco Ntaganda has been found guilty of war crimes by the International Criminal Court. He is the fourth person to be convicted by the ICC of atrocities which took place in the DRC's Ituri province between 2002 and 2003. After 248 days at trial, the court found the man dubbed the Terminator guilty beyond all reasonable doubt for 13 counts of war crimes and 5 counts of crimes against humanity. A power-sharing deal between Sudan's military rulers and leaders of a protest movement has been hailed as a giant step towards achieving a peaceful transition of power in the country. The three-year deal, brokered by the African Union and Ethiopia, was announced on Friday. Sudan has been plagued by internal conflict since the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir in April. Fighting continues between the UN-backed government of National Accord in Tripoli and the self-styled Libyan National Army. LNA forces have announced the dispatch of more reinforcements to the south of the capital Tripoli after facing a major setback in the nearby town of Garian. Libya remains split between two warring powers, the UN-backed government in Tripoli and led by Prime Minister Fayez Sarraj, and the self-styled Libyan National Army under General Khalifa Haftar. And African countries have taken a bold step in their quest to have a single continental market. Eritrea is now the only country that has not signed the African Continental Free Trade Area Pact. Nigeria, Benin, Equatorial Guinea and Gabon came on board at the AU summit in Niamey over the weekend. The agreement hopes to increase trade between countries on the African continent. If successful, it would unite 1.3 billion people, create a $3.4 trillion economic bloc. And that's a look at the day's top stories. To Brexit, where a Deloitte survey says that British companies are more worried about Brexit than at any time since the 2016 referendum. The survey also said that companies are planning to reduce investment and hiring due to Brexit. 83% of the CFOs queried believed that leaving the European Union would hurt Britain's long-term business environment. Almost two-thirds of the CFOs surveyed expected to cut hiring over the next 3 years as a result of Brexit, while 47% expected to reduce capital spending. The survey also attributed a second quarter economic decline in the UK due to an escalation of trade tensions in the world economy. In Greece, Conservative Party leader Kyriakos Mitsotakis was sworn in as Greece's new prime minister on Monday. The leader of the New Democracy Party told supporters that Sunday's resounding win over left-wing Alexis Tsipras gave him a strong mandate to change Greece. Take a listen.
And of course, our discussions with our European creditors will begin immediately. But we've made our plan very, very clear. There are no real surprises here involved. We want to drive a real reform agenda for the country that is ambitious, very bold and very, very detailed. And of course, we've made the case that lower primary surpluses will be to the benefit of everyone.
Moving to the Bond Connect program that links the Chinese mainland and Hong Kong markets. The program is celebrating its second anniversary as it enjoys global recognition and a more active role in the opening up of China's bond market. Observers predict that China will surpass Japan to become the world's second largest bond market this year. Foreign investors held over 1.95 trillion yuan in Chinese bonds in the interbank market at the end of June. Experts said the proportion of foreign investors' holdings in China's interbank bond market remains far below that of the world's developed markets. Chinese bonds are already included in the Bloomberg Barclays Global Aggregate Index. The markets are also expecting Chinese bonds to soon be included in other leading global indices, including the FTSE World Government Bond Index. Indonesia's expanding fleet of motor vehicles is a key target of urgently needed actions to curb the country's growing rate of air pollution. And to fix this, Southeast Asia's largest economy has decided to boost the number of electric vehicles on its streets, as CGTN Silkina Aluwalia now explains.
This is Indonesia's first electric taxi to hit the roads. Launched by one of the country's biggest taxi company, Bluebird Group, the electric car is a breakthrough innovation and part of an important commitment to support environmental conservation in Jakarta.
So one of the most important part of our EV projects in this e-taxi is actually to reduce to zero the vehicle emissions. So the gas emitted from the vehicles, that is part of the big pollutions within Jakarta, to be exact, because of the traffic that intensifies the pollutions coming from the fleets of cars. So because our fleet is always on the road, so by replacing one car with an EV, so that's deleting one car of air pollutions. That is, we hope to scale in a bigger industry. Now the bus also doing their trial.
Their new fleet includes 25 BYD cars from China and 4 Tesla cars from the UK. The new vehicle is expected to eliminate more than 430,000 kilograms of CO2 emissions, or equivalent to nearly 2 million liters of fuel consumption. Indonesia's national electricity company joined in the initiative by helping to build electric filling stations across Jakarta.
Electric vehicles are a new phenomenon, not just in Indonesia, but around the world. The government is still learning about the technology for cars, batteries, the recycling of those batteries, and the smelting. Once relevant officials fully understand these areas, laws and regulations will follow.
The government is targeting 20% of all cars produced in Indonesia to be electric by 2025. Experts are hoping this new technology can provide a bright future for eco-friendly vehicles in the country.
This is a huge step towards Indonesia's goals to reduce CO2 emissions by at least 29% by 2030. The innovation also aims to clear Jakarta's skies, a city that's known for its poor air quality. By 2020, Bluebird plans to operate more than 200 of these electric cars. Sulkina Aluwalia, CGTN, Jakarta.
China is the world's biggest tea producer and consumer, consuming 36% of the world's tea every year. Being a drink with millennia of history behind it, one might think there's not much more that could be done with tea. But as CGTN's Yang Chengshi reports, a new take on an old tradition is all the rage these days in China.
Bubble tea. It's a novelty in most countries, but it's a huge thing in China. See, the whole trend started in the Taiwan region back in the 1980s, where people first made these bubbles with tapioca and brown sugar. Mix it with milk, and the next thing you know, the drink has taken Asia by storm. What started from these bubble teas has now become a $13 billion industry, with much greater variety of teas to choose from.
This shop in downtown Shanghai sells up to 1,200 cups of tea drinks a day.
HeyTea started in 2012 and now has close to 200 stores in the country. It's one of the success stories of new tea drink brands in recent years. HeyTea made its name by popularizing a new star product.
We have created a new type of tea called cheese tea. We have put the very thick cheese foam on top of the brew teas that will offer the drinkers a rich taste of the tea.
People wait in line for hours to get these cheese foam covered teas. While this is once again proof that cheese is so often the foundation of good food, experts say this success case reveals a new battleground for tea drink brands to attract customers.
There's another factor that helped them become popular.
Social media. If there is one thing we know about millennials, they post their favorite food and drinks.
And we try to introduce the inspiration and our design sense into the brand and to our consumers, the young people, and try to have them love not only the cups they buy on their hands, but also the brand of HeyTea.
The competition has become super heated. Many more brands are trying to design their star product. Some add brown sugar to the milk tea, some sell drinks with bread. Every other brand is trying to create the next internet sensation. HeyTea rolls out about 4 new drinks every month, now focusing more on fresh fruit. At China's beverage industry expos, you'll find ambitious business people trying to get a piece of the cheese foam. Henry Xiao started a brand called Sanam this year.
What we are trying to do is we only use whole leaf, the high-end quality leaf. Seasonal fruit is one very big hit. If someone puts some seasonal fruit on the menu, that would instantly be the best seller.
His game plan? Using a kind of bubble not made with tapioca but with fresh juice and wheat flour.
Especially during 2018 and 2019, customers pay more money, extra money, just to experience what is possible for the creativity-wise about a drink.
At the end of the day, it's all about bringing a good cup of tea to the table. Yang Chengshi, CGTN, Shanghai.
More than 550 sports brands from over 10 countries and regions around the world are showcasing their latest products at this year's Expo Shanghai. Expo is an international trade show for sports, equipment and fashion in Asia. Our correspondent Zhang Yue finds out which outdoor sports are receiving the most attention.
An indoor mini football match taking place inside the venue is drawing attention because each player is equipped with a chip that collects and analyzes data. After the match, the players are able to compare their data with professional athletes in terms of passing rate, first contact rate, and total running distance. The idea is to help them improve.
The information helps me know my strengths and weaknesses better, so I can work on my weaknesses accordingly. My first contact rate is 82 compared to an average score of 92 for European soccer players.
Organizers have also invited professionals from all around the world to participate in more than 100 lectures and panels during the 3-day annual event. Germany's top soccer league, the Bundesliga, has representatives here for the first time to expand business opportunities.
It doesn't matter if they're old, if they're young, female, male, doesn't matter. So you feel that there are a lot of emotions for football in this country.
On the other side of the venue, there's also a water sports village, a diving tank, and a ski simulator. One organizer says the industry is changing.
If you look at the development of the Chinese market, it started a lot with outdoor sports, but now everything else is catching up. Football is very popular, it's a growing sport, but also like running, trail running, the participation in marathons is increasing, water sports is a topic, adventure travel is a topic, trekking, hiking, fitness is a huge topic for the population.
The sporting industry was worth 1.7 trillion yuan in 2015, according to an Administration of Sports of China report. In 2014, the central government also launched an initiative to boost the value of the industry to 5 trillion yuan by 2025. Zhang Yue, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Let's look at the commodities market now. Gold prices inched lower today following a steep fall in the previous session as a robust U.S. jobs report dashed hopes of an aggressive interest rate cut by the Federal Reserve later in July. Crude prices, on the other hand, were little changed as traders weighed geopolitical risks against the impact of the Sino-U.S. trade war on the global economy. Although last week's better-than-expected U.S. jobs data offered some support. You're watching Global Business, still ahead. We speak to a Soweto entrepreneur who is reclaiming poorly constructed houses.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
young entrepreneur in Soweto is bringing dignity to those living in poorly built backyard dwellings in South Africa. Landland Lovo's unique business idea reconstructs unsafe structures, creates employment, provides affordable housing, and generates an income for the landowner. CGTN's Julie Shire caught up with the Hustlenomics founder.
Self-confessed hustler in Landland Lovo is no ordinary entrepreneur. His innovative business Hustlenomics is turning unsafe backroom shacks into decent, affordable housing in South Africa's townships.
So the idea was actually born from my own frustration and personal experience, where in my own yard I had to build my own backyard structure. Having to grow up in a four-room house with a huge family, we couldn't actually afford to build the formal structures. So I took it upon myself to actually learn to be a bricklayer.
Hustlenomics employs mostly unskilled young people. He teaches them to build safe and durable structures using bricks from soil, cement and recycled construction waste.
We do it by training them to manufacture interlocking bricks and then using those same bricks to build structures. So we target low-income households and then we get into agreements with them to replace their shacks at no cost to the homeowners.
Ndlovu is changing the face of the backroom economy. Hustlenomics builds four-roomed houses at no cost to homeowners, but recoups the money and profit over 54 months through a profit-sharing model.
Out of the 4 units, they get ownership of a single unit. We use the 3 units to collect rent to recoup over a period of 18 months, and then we hand over another unit to the homeowner. We continue collecting from the 2 units for a period of 54 months. They get full ownership of the structure.
Hustlenomics is planning to expand to informal settlements where at least 13% of the population live.
It would be nice to see it actually developing in other townships that are going through a similar situation. Your informal settlements as well as the state that they are in. I'm sure in other countries they have like solutions to informal structures, but when you try to bring it to South Africa, it's a different environment.
Ndlovu has tapped into rental space that's long been overlooked by developers in South Africa, which could transform the township property market. Julie Shara, CGTN, Soweto, South Africa.
In Nigeria, gender stereotyping still limits women from taking up jobs that have traditionally been carried out by men. But in Jos, several women are pioneering a change. They're taking up jobs in informal sectors largely populated by men. CGTN Samson Omale reports from Jos.
In a city of 1 million people, Abigail Williams is the only female taxi driver. She took up driving after her husband died.
One day like that, I wake up, I drop my children in school. That was the last fuel I had, and I don't have any money for the next day for them to go to school. I just had a voice saying, "You have a car and you can use it." I saw so many people that were stranded that very day. And I said, taxi. That was how I started it. So less than 1 hour, I make some cool money. When I now go home, I said, yes, this is the business.
This barber salon is unique in Jos because it has Jane Lawan. She's now a female barber after learning to cut men's hair from a friend. Jane makes a little over $1 on every haircut.
I'm happy. I'm a barber. I'm a female barber. I'm very grateful because I'm having what I want. I'm getting what I want. And I get that respect. Many people used to respect me because some ladies, they don't want to go do something, have small change. Just depend on guys going up and down.
For her employer, Jane's gender doesn't matter.
Day in, day out, she's improving and she's very hardworking, and then she's just good.
But working in male-dominated professions doesn't come without its challenges, especially in northern Nigeria, where cultural and religious beliefs makes it a reality.
The first time it was not funny because in Jos, some will see you, God forbid, how can a female driving me? God forbid.
Some, they believe in their culture, say women know they touch their hair.
And if more women move into male-dominated professions, it could boost Nigeria's economy.
I look at Rwanda, how many percentage of women do they have in their parliament, in governance? Over 60%. And look at how far they have gone from where they were to where they are today. It is because they have given women opportunity.
So, women like Abigail could be driving Nigeria's economy towards greater returns. Samson Omale, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
And that's it on Global Business. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.